A judge blocked Florida's Stop Woke Act, a 2022 law that Governor Ron DeSantis staunchly backed. The three-judge panel on the appeals court said the law, which restricts how private companies teach diversity and inclusion in the workplace, is a, quote, First Amendment sin.
Well, DeSantis previously framed the bill as a measure for employees to stand up to discrimination in the workplace. According to the Washington Post, the ruling follows a lawsuit filed by Florida-based companies honeyfund.com, an online wedding registry website, and Primo, a Ben & Jerry's franchise, maintaining that it prevents them from providing training on systemic racism, oppression, and intersectionality. So I think a lot of these trainings are not great trainings, and I'm in good company. So do only 29% of people, according to this poll I found, think these kinds of diversity trainings improve relationships in the workplace. However, you can't, it's a private company. They can have whatever trainings they want. You don't have to work for them if you don't like it. You can object to them. But if the government tells the government is the institution that is constrained from mandating things. If the government mandates that a company or an individual or whatever has to do something or can't do something, that's the violation of the First Amendment. Some conservatives nowadays are like, this is censorship when my boss or when this company or when this store has this policy. No, it's censorship when the government tells them they have to do that. If the government says they can't, they're censoring the CEO or the owner of the store. So it's very clearly a First Amendment violation. Yes. I didn't think the act was a good idea. I'm happy to see it struck down.
It's blatant authoritarianism. I'm sorry. Ron DeSantis has been at the vanguard of leading the authoritarian push within the Republican Party, framing these as somehow anti-woke free speech issues, when the reality is he is using his power as a government official to exert his will and his politics on the people of Florida, and if he had his druthers, the people of the United States of America as president. And I do wonder if not just the failure of this law, but frankly the failure of his entire presidential campaign is a referendum in some ways about the limits of woke politics and the extent to which Americans can kind of see through this kind of posture and see it as what it is, a kind of state authoritarian overreach into their private lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reaction to, I think it's frustrating that we're getting to a point. It's very frustrating from my standpoint as a libertarian that just wants the government to mostly leave people and businesses and organizations alone, that like everything is going to be either forbidden or mandated, depending on who is in charge. It's not, because DeSantis also I think he took some action on COVID stuff. It wasn't just enough to say, we're not going to mandate vaccines here. I support that. I don't think it should be mandated. Of course not. It should be your choice. It's crazy that the government would compel you to make a medical decision. But of course, DeSantis wanted to go farther and say, a private employer would be forbidden from requiring you as a condition of employment to do that, or a cruise line would be forbidden to having people requiring people who buy the cruise to be vaccinated. And it's like, can't we just leave it to people and associations and organizations to figure out the best policies? Everything in our country now has to be required or forbidden. I don't want you to have to bake the cake for the gay wedding. You shouldn't be required to do it. You shouldn't be forbidden from doing it. It should just be your choice, and your choice to associate with other people and other businesses that share your values or don't. It's no business of the government's, and we're going down some very unfortunate directions.
Yeah, I wonder what you make of this new story. It's reported out, I'm reading now, from Esquire, where Trump said in Richmond earlier this week that he would take away all federal funds from public schools that require vaccines. Now, it seems pretty clear from the context that he had COVID in mind, but certainly that is not the only vaccine that is mandated for kids to attend public schools, rather. The Esquire pointed out that most states like Virginia require the MMR vaccine, chickenpox, polio, et cetera, which would basically mean withdrawing federal funding from all public schools. Do you worry also, I hear you making a distinction between what is mandated, what is prohibited, but still there are some areas where the federal government has said for public health and safety reasons there should be these mandates. And do you worry about some blurriness going on there as well?
Well, sure. I don't think schools should require the COVID vaccine just broadly speaking. And over time, fewer and fewer schools are doing that. There was, for a while, universities were one of the biggest holdouts for requiring vaccines. I keep looking at the list of ones that still require it. A couple more institutions are always dropping off. Do I think the federal government should try to persuade schools to adopt this policy by threatening to take away public funding? I don't know. I don't think they should obviously stop requiring like the measles vaccine or things like that.
But that's the question. Unless there's some clarification from Trump, he said vaccines. Yeah. And I think this is the concern, because when you have candidates like RFK Jr., who I think, frankly, have been drawing some lines and making some nuanced arguments about various different kinds of vaccines in different kinds of contexts, whether or not you agree with them.
Yeah, he's up to date on all the vaccines, or his children were until COVID.
The broader concern is whether or not people who are less careful, I would argue Trump in this instance, are creating a culture where people are rejecting any kind of health mandate that is well indicated by years and years of research and science, and which have brought the mortality rates down enormously for a lot of these different kinds of diseases.
But I would say this is different because we're talking about public money and public institutions. I mean, I do think the people or their elected representatives do have, it's not a First Amendment violation. Like if they said, if Trump said we're going to, decertify any Catholic school that requires the vaccine or doesn't require the vaccine, or Biden said it the other way, that I would argue would be a First Amendment violation. But just say, public funds being directed to public institutions, I do think government figures and the people get to weigh in on what they think those policies should be. Now, those policies might be wise or not wise, but there we do have, technically, we're the group decision making for what the public policy is going to be for the public institutions.
Right. I mean, there are constitutional limits on how much the federal government can use its power of the purse to influence states' ability to make their own decisions, but we don't have to do that whole constitutional discourse right now. Going back to the Stop Woke Act, I was rereading what it was supposed to do and how DeSantis characterized it. He said, no one should be instructed to feel as though they aren't equal or shamed because of their race, he said in a statement in 2022. In Florida, we will not let the far left woke agenda take over our schools and our woke places. No one should be instructed to feel as if they are not equal or shamed because of their race.
Our woke places?
Our workplaces or our woke places? Yeah, our workplaces. Yeah. And I'm really struck by the idea that you're going to try to police whether or not any action makes someone feel shame. That's so subjective. If I read about the Rwandan genocide, do I feel shame? I don't think I should. Mm-hmm. But if I subjectively do, then we can't learn about a historical reality. If I learn about the Vietnam War, something that does implicate me as an American citizen, and I feel shame, does that mean we can no longer teach about that? The obvious examples of slavery and the apartheid system that we had in the United States of America is, I think, where a lot of this is coming from. White kids shouldn't feel ashamed about that. Well, that's a very subjective belief. You can feel ashamed or not ashamed. I don't think some white child is responsible for the legacy of slavery. I mean, a lot of this is
co-opting. Conservatives co-opting what they perceive happened to them in higher education, where conversations or they were chilled or censored because of progressive students saying, I'm traumatized by this, I'm triggered by this, whole list of things you had to warn people about before you said, et cetera, and that kind of thing. Now, I thought that was all bad. We should not turn it on itself and use it as a weapon and put it in the law. But
well, that's what's going on right now, as we're seeing a lot of these firings. We maybe will cover some of them tomorrow, what's going on with some professors in the wake of October 7th at institutions of higher learning. The script is getting flipped on cancellations in a big way. Tune in and we'll discuss more of that rising after this.